to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
I told Cammie, I was like, you know what's funny? I didn't think about this till after we left.
All the guys in the kitchen and all the women watching football?
No, we were watching football.
Oh, yeah.
This is on the other TV.
Yeah.
But no, like, of all my friends, like, individually, that's the most, the group as a whole, probably minus me, would probably rather be by themselves.
Yeah.
Like, every single one of the people is like, they're not like life of the, so this wasn't a party where you're a bunch of people gathered together. It's like life of the party. Every single other person there was like, I kind of rather just be home by myself.
Yeah.
Like, every single one of them. I was like, this is strange to like be in a group of basically having a party with a bunch of introverts.
Yeah. Everybody's just kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah. Which is fun. What's fun is like when you have, it's proven the point that most introverts probably aren't actually like the stereotypical introvert.
Yeah.
Because
like to the extreme.
Yeah, because like when we're all hanging out, nobody was like trying to be on their own.
No.
We enjoyed each other's company.
Oh,
but
yeah, for sure.
It's just like, it's funny to like almost all of my introvert friends were in one room at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and I
guess Dave is not really an introvert.
No, he's pretty outgoing, but
I don't know about Sarah, but like
she is.
She's
okay.
Okay.
But seems to be, at least, I think.
I was thinking more so like you and Michelle and Colin and Andrea are like, we kind of rather just be home by her.
Yeah.
You know?
And then I was already tired, but I take a sleep aid pretty early on Sundays so that it's out of my system by the time I get up early Monday.
Before?
Yeah. So I had taken it at 4.
No wonder.
And so I was like, my eyes were feeling so heavy, and I sat down and like I put my
Are you dozing?
Yeah. I put my hoodie behind my head, kind of made it like a pillow. And then who was it? It was it might have been Riley, but she was like, "Are you taking a rest?" And I was like,
awesome.
Yeah. I was just cracking my eyes every now and then to watch what was going on in the game.
Towards the end of the game, because it was so bad, it was definitely like that. But
yep.
I guess I'm taking, so Pierce is not here today.
Pierce is
first
sick.
time ever. We had a bunch of firsts. Had to do a rerun. Then Pierce is sick.
Yeah, life has been weird the last few weeks.
I'm like on the brink of dizziness now. Yep. So I'll take Pierce's role today.
The next episode, it'll be just me.
Just you, all by yourself. Although I didn't do any like by Ryan's because it's Pierce's thing. So
yeah.
I'll just introduce. So what are we talking about today, Ryan?
All right. So today we're going to talk about the qualifications for overseers from 1 Timothy 3, cross-referenced over to Titus. We've talked about this in passing before, but I thought it'd be interesting for you and I to discuss the importance of these qualifications.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's, I have friends who recently have been looking for jobs, pastoral jobs. My brother-in-law is still looking for a pastoral job, like in a church. And it's interesting to me a lot of times how these churches kind of approach that, and how they approach it more from a business. Like they're trying to fill
yes.
instead of like looking at these qualifications.
Yes.
And why do these matter? So let me read the text really quickly. This is 1 Timothy 3, 1-7. This saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders so that he will not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. So that is a lot of things.
Yeah.
And like churches, it's interesting. I'm learning that a lot of churches now aren't even doing the interview process themselves. They're having like headhunters do it. And so they have like these organizations that kind of filter through these resumes. And then once that organization has narrowed it down, they'll send 3 or 4 resumes on to the church. And I thought, man, first of all, that feels really impersonal. But also, how do you get to know this kind of character of the person? I remember what actually shifted for me that made me go, man, I want to be a pastor, because I was traveling full time and preaching. And then in December of 2004, I went and filled in for a church one Sunday when their pastor was out of town, and come to find out he was about to retire. And so they asked me to stay basically and be their interim pastor. They asked me to be their pastor. I was like, no, I'll do it for 6 months, 7 months until my summer season kicks off. So December 2004 through June 2005, I was a pastor in down by San Antonio. And I loved being able to be there week after week with these families and get to actually know the families, because prior to that, I would just travel and preach, and I'd be in and out like you and I have done for years. And so getting to know the families and getting to be able to develop like a thought, and instead of just like doing 2 services over a weekend and then being gone, I loved it so much. But one of the things that I really tried to do with them, because I knew they were looking actively for a pastor, is I was like, who cares what initials he has after his name? Who cares, like, you know, how big of a church he pastored before? Like, what does he say about Jesus? What's his heart? And so with the pastor search committee, I was able to like kind of point them back to 1 Timothy 3, like, let this matter more than his pedigree, than his, you know, his actual degree.
I think it's, to add to another layer of awkwardness with that whole process, I think it's interesting that it's a pastor search committee.
Yes.
Because Paul seems to tell Timothy to be the one who appoints other elders.
Yes.
It's a qualified elder, overseer. We'll use those words interchangeably. It's a qualified overseer who is appointing other overseers.
Yeah.
We have abandoned that, right?
Yeah.
So now you have a bunch of people who aren't qualified, who don't understand the qualifications and the importance of them.
Right.
Picking a pastor. So let's just say hypothetically,
those people aren't elders, and then they're picking an elder.
I was going to say, let's just say hypothetically, the quote unquote pastor search committee, whatever they call it at their church, in a church, says we want to pick someone who has those qualifications.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the majority of the time that group can explain what those qualifications are or the importance of them. And so it's funny that we wonder, like, why do we end up with these leaders, these people that we ask to be pastors who don't fit well with us? Well, it's because you have people who don't understand the qualifications and the importance of Paul's qualifications.
Yeah.
Picking.
Yeah.
And they're picking, you're right, for a business perspective who, well, you know what's funny? I don't particularly mind the headhunter thing.
Yeah.
In principle.
Yeah.
Because I think you could do it in a way that
you could do it following a 1 Timothy 3 model.
Exactly, right. Yeah. So I don't particularly mind that in principle. You're correct in how it tends to go.
Well, to your point, and I appreciate that you always do this, I tend to approach it as an absolute, and you tend to approach it from a spectrum. And there are people, theoretically, that could be headhunters for a church that are actually following the model of 1 Timothy 3.
We should do that. We should start a headhunter. I mean, I'm not joking. We should start that.
Help other churches find pastors?
But because we understand those qualifications and are very strict on those qualifications. I mean, I don't think, how cool would that be? Even if it's not like an actual company, but where we like
help. We're an advisory team.
Yeah. I mean,
I'd love it.
It's not a bad idea.
No, I'd love it.
Because I think, I'm not actually convinced that most churches want their system of picking a pastor to be like that. I think they're trying to get by, right?
Yeah.
So the business model, the CEO model that our parents started, the boomers started, I'm not just saying that. That's like, a lot of people have said that. The CEO model came in from our parents' generation. What that produces is you have kind of like a one-man show.
Yep.
And when that guy leaves, people are left to pick up the pieces. So I think a lot of these committees and groups and teams that are picking a pastor are really trying their best.
They're trying to keep their head above water.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm not even faulting them.
No, but because the system is faulty, and now you have this void, so now you have an aimless ship, you know, without a captain.
Yes.
They're trying to hurry and get another captain.
Yes.
Instead of, well, here's part of the problem. This is something that I was trying to explain to Michelle the other day, because I was just thinking about it, but in a little more detail. I say trying to explain. She understood it, but it's not a conversation we'd had before. I don't think a youth pastor should be a training position.
Agreed.
So a youth pastor should have the same qualifications as this elder here in 1 Timothy 3.
Yes.
And if they don't, they shouldn't be teaching the youth.
I think, yes. And I think another layer to that we should talk about is I think a lot of churches don't view the youth pastor as a pastoral role.
Right.
So let's at least be honest. If you're a church that feels that way, don't call him a pastor.
Right.
I know there's like some hot topic debate over what we call pastor, and people are pissed at me for saying this is a biblical definition of pastor, not a cultural definition of pastor, and screw those people, because I'm always going to lean on the scripture, right?
Sure.
But like, if you don't think it's a pastoral position, don't call him a pastor.
Right. Well, and to that point, also, there are a lot of youth pastors who are like, well, I just want to be a youth pastor until I can be a pastor one day, which tells you that the youth pastor doesn't even have the correct mindset, because they're using it as a stepping stone, as a training ground. And you ought to be elder qualified in that role.
Yes. Which is why Pierce, our quote unquote student pastor, is an overseer.
Yeah.
And
he's
I would
qualified.
trust Pierce to do. Pierce preaches for you. I mean, he's not leading worship for me, right? But
I'm not leading worship for you.
But like, we trust our viewpoint of overseers for us at the 456 is that not that we're all interchangeable in terms of roles, but that we're all qualified
or ability.
But we're all qualified to do the same thing in terms of an overseer. So you can't. For us, we wouldn't put someone in an overseer role that we wouldn't trust to do counseling with someone, that we wouldn't trust to teach, even if the teaching is not at the same level, right? So like, it's unfair to Pierce, who has not preached even close to as much as you and I've preached, and I haven't even preached as close to as much as you've preached, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it would be unfair to say, like, let's compare them apples to apples, but we trust Pierce to preach. Well, you trust me to preach.
And we feel that all three of us are qualified elders.
Yes. Or I should say teach instead of preach.
I'm with you. But yeah, we're all qualified elders.
Yes.
And I'm happy every week that my boys are sitting under Pierce and learning from Pierce.
100%.
Because instead of it being a situation where you're sending your kids to a babysitter who's teaching, like, I don't know, garbage. Like, look, I feel as strongly about the overseer qualification, and you might not say overseer, but like pretty close, even with kids ministry. Like if you're regularly in a position where you're teaching children the Bible, you need to be qualified to teach the Bible and not just willing to teach it.
I think I think there's this. I know that this is debatable, but I don't feel like there's a direct correlation between the group in Ephesians 4 and the 1 Timothy and Titus qualifications of.
I agree.
So I know that there's some overlap. I'm acknowledging that, but what I'm saying is I don't think that the group in Ephesians 4 have to all be overseers.
Yeah, agreed. Those are giftings to the church to build up.
And
the
I
church.
know, I get it, Britton. You're gonna like give me another thought, or Cole, you're gonna give me, like, all these people are gonna give me these other thoughts.
And we'll invite that.
I'm waiting for the not the guess, not the I think, not the someone told me a couple summers ago. What else would it be?
Yeah.
What else would it be? But like, so it's the point about the teachers and the kids. I think that there's an acknowledgement in Ephesians 4. I'm saying I think this.
Yeah.
That there is a role of a shepherd teacher.
Yes.
That is not elder. An overseer, right? Or there could be, right? So I think that's what you're saying. Like, but it's still someone that we would say needs
qualified.
to be qualified as a
in that
teacher,
way.
right?
Yeah.
And what we have typically done is said, who's willing?
Right. Yeah. And then you have people shortchanging the Bible teaching of these students, these kids. Let's look at some of these here. So, because I think what's interesting is, I think myself, and I mean me for sure, I think the tendency is to have a hard line on this, and I think you're going to have a spectrum on this, which I think is going to be.
I love being on the spectrum.
Closer to the correct perspective. So, an overseer must be above reproach, and so this is not to say you don't have people who disagree with you or dislike you or whatever, but like, I think, I don't know. Thoughts on that? Above reproach? I have some ideas.
It feels to me like a character issue.
I agree.
Because I think that, let me skip forward a little bit as an example of above reproach. Is this the passage he says not quick-tempered? Or is that Titus?
It's Titus, but it's the same concept. Yeah.
What does he say here?
He says,
I don't have my iPad. Sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot my iPad, so I don't have it.
Let me pull it up. Let me pull up Titus.
So I'm going to correlate those two. I think there probably will be people who would say I was quick-tempered.
Yes.
But I think you and Pierce would acknowledge I'm not actually quick-tempered.
Yes.
What people are comfortable with.
Titus says, an overseer, God's steward, must be above reproach, must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain.
Okay, yeah. So like, I think that this is why I think the weight lies in other overseers appointing, right? So like, if you and Pierce were evaluating me,
right,
and someone came to you and said, hey, I think Mike is arrogant and quick-tempered.
Yeah.
You guys would probably be like, well, tell us why. Like, why do you think that?
Yeah.
You would want to know. Like, maybe there's some stuff going on in the background. You guys, you wouldn't think that, but like, you would want to know. Like, is Micah like doing something we don't know about? Or if someone saw me at like a football game yelling at the refs, they're going to be like, he's quick-tempered, right? But that's their perspective of what that definition is,
right?
And I think it's similar with above reproach, right? So like, there would be people who would go, wait, you're pastors and you guys have been in casinos?
Yeah.
That's not above reproach, right? Or you guys drink alcohol sometimes? Like, that's not, you see what I'm saying? Like, someone can take their moral, cultural perspective and say, this is the standard for what above reproach looks like. And I don't think that's what Paul's saying here.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a character issue.
Yeah, agreed. I think you're right that most people can apply their standard to that concept, right? Above reproach. And I might not meet your standard of above reproach, but I don't think, let's see. So let's see here. Must be the Greek word in the King James, they translate it blameless. I'm just curious here. So not apprehended, that cannot be laid hold of, that cannot be reprehended, irreproachable, meaning, okay, so let's think about this from the Jewish perspective, right? Because that's kind of where this starts, right? And you go on Paul's first missionary journey with Barnabas, and they're going through all these synagogues, and then they come back through, and they're appointing elders in every town, back to your point of elders appointing elders. Mm-hmm. And so they can't be charged with something. And so from a Jewish perspective, you had to have 2 or 3 witnesses before somebody could actually be charged with something.
Oh, interesting.
Right? And so this isn't an individual's idea of that. This is like, what can you actually be charged with? So like, you could say about me, well, Ryan doesn't care about people because he isolates himself and he likes, like you pointed out a moment ago, you're right. I like to be alone. I really don't mind it. Mm-hmm. She knows me well enough now that it didn't hurt her feelings, but usually on Sunday afternoons, we go pick up Whataburger for supper because I don't feel like cooking or anything. Well, we had plans Sunday night, so the boys said, hey, can we get Whataburger tonight? I said, sure. And so I went to get it, and Michelle goes, hey, you want me to go with you? And every time she goes with me. So like, the asking is just
normal.
Yeah, but every time she goes with me. I'm like, sure. She goes, would you be sad if I didn't go? I'm like, no. And she goes, you wouldn't be sad if I didn't go? And I'm like, no. Like, I'd be sad if you died. I'd be sad if you slept on the couch at night. I'd be sad if, like, there's a lot of things that would make me sad, but me riding 10 minutes into town to pick up burgers and you not going with me doesn't make me sad, right? And so I think that people want me to be sad that they're not around or that they're, and I'm just not.
Right.
And so somebody
you just don't care about people, right?
somebody might accuse me of that. The next person would come along and go, no, like he was by my hospital bed the whole time I was in the hospital.
Yeah, that's why I think it's an interesting point, the 2 or 3 witnesses. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what it means here, but like, it's an interesting take in terms of the charge thing, because
you have to be culpable of a charge.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it would be like,
it can't just be someone's opinion.
No.
Is what we're getting at.
Yes.
So to be above reproach is not, you have the opinion that you don't like the way I do this.
Yes. Yeah. Now, I mean, here's a question for you. Maybe like I have this thought, like what if the church as a whole, not the church as a whole, but like a particular local gathering shares like some cultural morals, right? So I'll say stupid stuff. So like when I used to do camps for independent Baptist churches, like if that church said, we're only doing King James Bible, which is dumb. But like if that, like, so that would be my guess is they would probably only ask someone to come be a pastor if they shared that same perspective. And while I disagree with them on the perspective, I don't necessarily disagree with picking somebody that fits that group. Because I do think there's a sense of contextualization that goes in. So like if if one of us went to or if someone was going to go pastor in the southern Philippines,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to like culturally shift from, let's say you came from America,
Mm-hmm.
your culture has to shift, right?
Right.
You have to interact differently with that culture.
Right.
So you can't say like, well, I'm an American, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't fit. So that's what
No.
I mean. I think that's why I think it's a character issue, because
Yes.
the moment you get down to the nitty gritty of like cultural morals, I think it gets really, really hazy.
Well, and to Paul's point in 1 Corinthians 9, if it's a situation like that, then for the sake of the gospel, you lay aside the right you have for the sake of the gospel, which I think would still...
It's still a character issue.
Yeah, that's your character.
It's the heart of, of a pastor.
But I think the other thing is like people piecemeal this, right? And they're like, well, he does this really well, but maybe he's failing on these other 8. Instead of like trying to look at this as a total package, right?
It is a total package.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, I think there's some conversation with that because Titus's list is a little bit
different. Well, and
the list in Titus is a little different. Not
right.
Titus's list.
Yeah, and so I mean, the point being that it's trying to look at the character holistically,
yes,
instead of like different things,
yes,
right? So it's going. I just had my annual checkup a couple of weeks ago and had my blood work done, and so my vitamin D was low. My cholesterol overall was good, but my bad cholesterol was a little bit high. And one of my other levels was a little bit high. The BUN levels, it's blood, urea, nitrogen, so it's toxins in your blood.
Mm.
And the cholesterol is just a little bit off the chart from normal, just a little bit above. But
which is a debatable chart. Did you know that?
Right. Yeah, totally. But the last 2 times I was in the chart, and then 6 years ago I was out of the chart and stuff, and I haven't been running as much, but I also haven't watched my diet as much as, lately, right? So
yeah, you're apparently eating Whataburger every Sunday night.
I am, yeah. and I'm not gonna change that. But what's interesting, right, is if you look at me holistically, I'm pretty healthy. Right. And so you go, okay, well, this number is a little bit high because you've tried to eat more protein lately. And so this throws off this number a little bit. And this cholesterol is a little bit high, but your overall cholesterol is still low. So you're good. And so that's the thing is you can't just look at one factor because then
right.
you're gonna Google it and you're going to be dead. You're gonna be like, oh crud, I'm about to die.
Yeah, you have cancer.
Right. And so you have to look at the whole thing, and you have to look at all the numbers. And when all the numbers are taken together, my doctor has not called me back because my doctor's not worried about me.
So I lean, I think you probably do too, that this is a holistic list.
Yeah.
Like that, I'm not going to call it comprehensive.
Yes.
But I think that
it's trying to get an idea of the whole of the person.
I would say for me, if someone doesn't hit one of these things that Paul mentions either in Timothy or Titus, it's going to be a question mark for me.
Yeah.
If they hit all of them but one,
yeah,
I feel like we're not saying like they got a 90 out of 100. I'm saying like there is no
pass fail.
There is no grade.
I think for me, I've almost land where you land on that. I think for me, it would be like, okay, why do I have this reservation about this one thing? Is it something that's actually a failure? Am I applying my own standard to it?
Yeah, I got you.
But
no, I'm with you.
Because I know myself that there are plenty of things that I don't like.
Well, I think that's why it's a benefit to have the structure
plurality.
Paul seems to lay out is that Timothy appoints a plurality of overseers and elders. And then I'm adding this. My guess is that pattern continues.
Yes.
Maybe not, right? But I think that's probably what happens. The text doesn't say it. So, but point being here, like if me, you, and Pierce, which we've been very slow about this since something crazy happened back in the day with another elder, but like when we're picking, it's us 3 picking. It's not Ryan picking or Micah picking or Pierce picking. And so I think we eliminate what you're talking about.
Yes.
If you have a reservation that is a bias based on you, then the 3 of us talking about together eliminates that.
The reality is that we don't fancy ourselves as astute as Timothy or Titus.
No.
Because Paul told Timothy, I'm leaving you there to do this. Paul told Titus, I've sent you to Crete to appoint elders in all these places, But but anyway.
I'm not saying that the plurality picking is a pattern that's a biblical pattern we have to follow. I'm saying
there's some wisdom in it though.
I'm saying it's probably better.
Yeah, there's definitely some wisdom in it. So above reproach, husband of one wife, there's so much debate about this. one wife at a time? Is that what's intended in the text? Like you can't be a polygamist, or some people take this to be you can't be divorced and remarried.
Right.
And so I don't know. Thoughts? Which way do you go on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
think it depends.
Yes, I think that's my answer. I think that where we used to land, where probably you and I used to land, was that this was someone who had never been divorced.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that we probably still lean that way but aren't stuck on it is because we realized that perspective we had was based on a law model, from the Mosaic Law.
Right.
Here's one struggle I have that makes me still lean that direction.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Is the qualifications for taking care of a widow.
Right.
Is that she must have been the wife of one husband.
Right.
So there is no cultural perspective where
in the same book,
and there is no cultural perspective where there were women who had multiple husbands.
Right.
So I feel like that eliminates the polygamy thing.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be the same standard.
Yeah.
The wife of one husband. So what I don't know is how you reconcile that. So that's why I still lean.
Yeah.
So I think I'm with you. What I would probably do is be like, let's just say it was someone that had been divorced.
Yeah.
I would want to know what the situation was.
Yeah. I'm with you that it seems here, husband of one wife, and then the wife of one husband, 2 chapters later, talking about the widows, that the correlation has to be the same.
Like it's the same conversation, right?
Yeah.
So So I think that there's obviously Peter tells women, if you have an unbelieving husband who leaves you, you're free.
Right.
So that would be a divorce.
Right. And there's an exception.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would want to know what's the situation here.
Agreed.
So let me give you here you go, Colin. I give you a nuance that I think would be a question mark for me, that it may be not a question mark in a negative, but a positive way. Let's say there was a guy we were considering to be an overseer for eldership who had been divorced. And let's just say let's say young married, and his wife ran off with someone else. You and I have done this long enough to know that there was probably something
was wrong.
Was wrong, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be a question mark, but I also think I know of a particular situation where it might be someone that I would consider.
Yeah.
Where the wife had left. So I'm just saying I lean that way.
Yeah.
It would be.
I think it's a good starting place to say, here's where we lean, but we'll listen to the case.
Yes.
We'll listen to the argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be completely ousted, but probably most of the time, because there's going to be very few situations where the divorce was not some character issue.
Right. Agreed.
Which I think people forget. This isn't about the rule Paul's giving.
Right.
This is about having someone that fits the role to be able to shepherd in that way.
Right. So
sorry, I shouldn't use that word in that, because people then are going to make the correlation.
Yeah.
No, I think it's fair. No, it's fair.
We would argue, I think, that if you're an overseer, because you have to be able to teach, you're also probably shepherding to some degree. That's probably part of your task.
Yeah.
You know? So sober-minded, one who thinks rightly about things, one who thinks clearly about things. I think of 1 Peter 1, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober in your spirit, right? Set your hope fully on the grace that is brought to you at the day of Christ Jesus. So I think when the Bible talks about having a right mind or thinking rightly, it is thinking rightly about the kingdom. It is thinking rightly about the return of Christ. To me, this isn't just somebody who's a good thinker. It is someone who is thinking rightly about the things of Christ and the gospel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think you could have a lot of people who are good thinkers, but still don't approach their life from the perspective that I belong to the kingdom and that Christ is going to return.
Yeah.
And it seems to, even in Romans 12, for example, where in chapter 11, he's just mentioned the mercy of God 4 times to the Gentiles, and that God sealed all Jews and Gentiles up under sin so he could show mercy to all. And then Romans 12, therefore, when you consider God's mercy, present your bodies to him as a living sacrifice. And then he says, and don't conform any longer to the patterns of
this world.
of this world. Thank you. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you can test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So again, there, the mindset is a right mindset of the work of Jesus. Or
Yes.
even in Ephesians 4:22-24, put off the old man, which is growing corrupt according to the deceitful lust of the flesh. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind. Put on the new man created in the likeness of Christ, righteous and holy. So when the New Testament authors talk about the mind and the sober-mindedness, they are talking about a right thought about Christ and his kingdom.
Yes.
That's where I would land on this. Thoughts?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So sober-minded is thinking rightly about Jesus.
And sadly, I think this probably disqualifies a lot of people that are in that role in churches right now.
Well, I can already hear some people probably going, man, y'all are raising the bar really high. No one's going to be qualified.
I'm not raising the bar at all.
And what we're
We're
doing,
just talking about Paul's bar.
right? And when people go, not very many people would be qualified then. Yes, exactly the point.
That's the point.
Yeah. That there are so few who are qualified that if we would quit being lazy with the qualification process, our churches wouldn't be in such dire straits.
Yes. So on that thought, I have a feeling there's more people than churches think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because they're so clouded by trying to pick someone that fits their church model,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes more important than picking someone who is qualified.
Mm-hmm.
I bet that in the majority of local gatherings, there are one or two men who are qualified to
Yeah.
do this.
Well, and interestingly enough, the way that the Bible tends to use elder, we talked about it being interchangeable, but the way that the Bible tends to use elder is it was almost always someone who was an older person. The idea being that, like, I hate to say it this way because I know that there are exceptions, but go ahead.
I don't know if you would take that position because Paul tells Timothy,
Don't let them look down on you because you're young. Yeah.
And he wasn't young in our
No.
culture, but he was probably around 40.
Yeah, young in their culture.
So,
But set an example for the believers
right. So I don't even know if that's the case culturally then,
Right.
because he's telling a young guy.
to appoint elders. But I do think that oftentimes there is, I agree 100% with you. I do think oftentimes there is, I'm not the same person that I was in my 20s
Mhm.
as I approach my 50s. And there is some maturity that happened. Not that can't happen in a young person.
No, I think that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think I'm still struggling with that because it's like, what if you had you right now training you when you're in your 20s?
Yeah, I would have been much better. You're right.
So I'm not sure. I always say age is an opportunity
I know.
for wisdom. It
I
doesn't
love it.
apply it. I mean, even
Yeah.
in Job, like the only sane person in the book of Job was the
youngest
young guy, right?
Yeah, you're right. So
I think what you actually don't mean is age. I
Yeah.
think what you actually mean is maturity.
yeah, I like that. I think you're right.
I don't think you can tie it to age. I don't think you're ever going to be in a situation where I'm not going to give you some situation that's going to make you question your
No.
stance on age.
No, I think you're right.
I do think that there is a sense of
Well,
like,
for
when Paul
example,
says,
there was a couple whose premarital counseling I did a decade ago, and they were very, very young. But I also knew how they walked with the Lord. I also knew that both of them came from incredibly godly families, and I wasn't worried about them at all. And then there have been other couples that were young like them, and I was like, you guys are not going to make it, because they were so egotistical, and they were so, and so the difference wasn't the age. You're right. The difference was maturity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that
Well, and that's what this is. This list is like, there's a maturity here. There's a wisdom here.
I will say this, to maybe give your age thing a little bit of leniency. When he talks about how you handle your household well, you can't do that if you're not old enough to have a household.
If you're 15,
right?
Yeah.
You can't. I'm gonna say it's. I'm not saying that you couldn't be in your early 20s and fit these qualifications.
Yeah.
I think that there's got to be some wisdom culturally that we apply to appointing these people in terms of their maturity. So
Yeah.
what you meant earlier by like you're a different person now than you were in your 20s was more about maturity. Some of that was related to your viewpoint in the scriptures.
Yep.
You could probably actually make a case that you weren't really that sober minded at that point.
Agreed.
You were kind of stuck in this like this was about, like you've even acknowledged it before, like the first time you read through the scriptures, it was about you
Ego.
trying to, right.
Yeah.
So I think that those things can be seen. I think that's kind of the idea of this list is like, if someone's above reproach, they're probably going to have enough maturity where that's going to flow into how they, how they do the other things in life.
And
too.
it gets into this next one, self-controlled,
Mhm.
which we also know is part of the fruit of the Spirit, right? And so someone who is self-controlled, someone who is there are people. I read a deal the other day, and I know 100% that what I'm about to say comes from a place of bias. I know it, and I can't stop it. Okay. But you know how I feel, and I know that there are listeners who are going to disagree with me, but you know how I feel when people say, well, if you're an alcoholic, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, you know, and I hate it.
It's kind of a dumb statement.
I hate it. And my dad, people go, well, your dad was an addict. Like, he couldn't help it. No, screw that.
What do you mean he couldn't help it?
He chose it over and over and over and over again. And people will say, no, he was an addict.
Christians say that?
Yeah. And people go, well, he was an addict, and that's what addicts do. Listen, that completely denies the power of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Completely denies the power of
Absolutely.
Jesus. There is no such thing as an addiction that is greater than the shed blood of Christ.
No.
And my
Or
dad,
the power of the Spirit that now lives in you through faith.
And so when people argue for that position, that like, well, he just couldn't have any self-control. And it's like, yeah, because he didn't have the Spirit in him, right? Like, so when I see people continue to make the same stupid choice over and over and over again, I've started, because of you, I've started following Dave Ramsey on Instagram. And the number of times he just calls people stupid in his podcast is hilarious. But like,
this is what I would have been like had I not gone into ministry and done finance. I would have had his demeanor.
Yeah. Well, you still have his demeanor.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
It's just not in terms of finance.
It's just not about finance. It's about faith.
I guess technically it is.
Well,
when people tell me,
in part of it. I mean, that's a small part.
I'm probably less adamant about, I wouldn't tell people they're stupid in finances quite as quickly as he would.
Yeah.
I would more so in like spiritual stuff.
Yeah. But like, there's this idea that you can be a follower of Jesus and then your life can just kind of be this aimless wandering. And it's like, no, like, the Spirit constrains us.
Yes.
And the love of God constrains us.
Yes.
And so if you see someone who doesn't have any self-control, somebody who keeps saying whatever area, like physical health to me isn't the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to have longevity.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching a video the other day that the guy was saying that a woman should be able to carry 75% of her body weight as a farmer's carry. And a man should be able to carry 100% of his body weight as a farmer's carry for 1 minute each. Mm-hmm. And he goes, and if they can do that, it shows us the kind of person they'll be at 70 or 80. Because grip strength and your balance.
Which one's a farmer's carry?
It's just the dead hang. It's like carrying two suitcases.
Sides?
Yeah.
Okay.
In
each hand, your own body weight, or like total your own
body
so
weight,
like,
but between two hands, right? So, because if you just
I'm gonna test this now.
Yeah, if you do it in just one hand, it's called a suitcase carry, and you're having to, but you're engaging your core, you're engaging your legs, you're engaging your balance, and you're engaging your grip strength.
I gotta know now.
And they said, and it was crazy because they were like, just from a super practical standpoint, if a woman can do that, we know when she's 80, she'll still be able to open a jar in her kitchen. She won't trip on the carpet.
Interesting.
And so it has a huge kind of like, there's a huge curve that correlates between those things, health, right? And so my biggest thing isn't someone's health, but if I see that they're like, oh, I don't have any self-control in my diet, I don't have any self-control in my health, I don't have any self-control in here, I begin to wonder, do you have any self-control in your pursuit of the Lord? Do you have any, it makes me wonder.
No, you're right. It's why, like, and maybe this is an unfair stat, but I'm making this stat up. That's why about like 90% of the people I know that smoke cigarettes, their car is filthy.
Yeah. Never thought about it. That's funny.
I mean, I could go on. Like, there's correlations that they're not across the board, right?
Yeah.
It's like when Dave Ramsey says they'll do in Financial Peace University, like 85 or 90% of people do this.
Yeah.
I'm like, literally, I'm like the anomaly. I'm
Every
like,
time.
I'm the other person, right? So I understand that there's not.
There's always an exception.
But I think your point's valid, like that there seems to be some correlation. So if, I don't really know what self-control, how you would define that in terms of food. because
Yeah.
that's going to be kind of like a cultural moral. Like,
Totally.
but I do think you would recognize it. Like if, to your point, if, all right, Cammy made snickerdoodles for the Super Bowl party.
Yeah.
Aiden and I,
You can eat those
it's like our kryptonite, right?
Yeah.
So we're just, and so like while we would joke, I don't have any self-control with snickerdoodles.
Yeah.
It's not actually true.
No, and it's also one night. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a thing.
I don't make
yeah.
snickerdoodles every day because
Yeah.
I can't. And
Because then you would eat them. Like the self-control is
I
you don't
don't-
make snickerdoodles every day.
I don't actually know if I would.
Oh yeah.
No,
You
no,
think
no. I think it's part of the reason I eat them like that is because
it's a treat.
she only makes them every once in a
Well,
while, right?
it's her chilerianos.
Oh,
right.
okay, those I would eat.
All the time.
All
Yeah,
right,
to your point, that can't be an absolute. But when you kind of see a whole bunch of things where a person is like, oh yeah, I keep spending too much money every month.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I keep doing this. Oh yeah, I keep doing that. And you go, okay, so this is a self-control issue.
100%.
At some point, I'm going to begin to wonder where you're lacking self-control in your spiritual life.
So I will say this, like, and this is, I don't think this is a biblical
Oh,
thing.
and I don't think self-control here is probably health or diet
I don't
or
think
whatever.
so either.
Yeah. But my point is, I start to get suspicious.
Yes. So one point I was going to make on that, because I'm with you on the suspicious, is if we were considering someone to be an overseer at the 456 and they had an insane amount of bad debt,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a big question mark for me.
Yes.
Because it means that it feels to me a little like handling your household well.
Yeah.
Like if you struggle handling finances personally.
Yeah.
And now we're asking you to come be part of that whole process amongst a church. Like that's a big question mark for me.
And yeah, it would be for me too. It's like every cop show, every dirty cop, right? Had financial troubles and then they started on the take. You know what I mean? But like, do we trust a person who came on to our staff? Do we trust a person that has, way too much money in debt to count the offering every Sunday unsupervised? Probably not.
No, which is why we don't ever do it unsupervised anyways.
Right. But all right. So respectable. Now this one's culturally defined again, I think. Like,
yeah.
Because again, what do you mean by respectable?
Is it culturally defined, you think? Or is it like have a broader meaning than each culture would say? So
okay, go.
So like if respectable respectable in the Southern Philippines might look different than respectable. Oh, let me do a different one. Respectable in West Texas might look different than respectable in
Oregon,
Northeast or the Northwest, right? I think that there are some cultural morals that we would consider, but I don't think that those could be the standard.
Well, I would argue in that case that that's cultural. West Texas cultural or Northwest cultural?
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me say it better.
Okay.
I think there are, when we in West Texas think of someone as respectable, I think there is some weight to that culturally.
But
I don't think that's what Paul's saying.
That's not the standard. Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
I don't think those can be the standards for what respectable is.
Because it's too fluid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, because it's like if I move, then I have to learn the culture again.
Yeah. All right. So thoughts on respectable?
I think it's got to be a little more broad.
Okay.
So here's totally my thought. I actually haven't thought much about this because I've never taught this text before. So I don't have a lot of intense study here. I kind of think it's like if you took, totally my opinion, if you took Micah and put it and asked people who knew him from different environments, from different worlds, like 456 people in the disc golf world, people from traveling ministries. Like if you asked my extended family who lives all over the country, right? If you asked those different people and there was a consistency to it of, yes, I respect Micah. Yeah. I think that would probably be considered respectable. If you have someone who is maybe like, let's just say Micah's respected at the 456, but then you start asking questions in the disc golf world and they're like, yeah, he's kind of a sketcy dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like
it only occurs twice in the New Testament, which doesn't give us a lot of extra stuff to look at. The other place is that women must be modest. And so,
so maybe it's a different,
it's well arranged, seemly, modest. So someone who, the way they carry themselves then is like,
okay. So I don't think I'm going to go completely back on what I said, but I think it's probably different than what I was saying. I think probably what I was saying about asking different groups could be an okay way to like measure it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So, well-arranged, seemingly modest, a man living with decorum, a well-ordered life. So
I like that.
Yeah. So this is a person who is living life kind of well. They're respectable.
Yeah.
Like,
So maybe the word was used that was culturally, maybe Paul's using a word that's culturally understood then.
yeah, maybe so.
Someone that was respectable in their culture was
Yeah.
someone who fit that.
Yeah.
Put together. Would you say, was that one? Life.
A well-ordered life.
Well-ordered life.
Yeah. All right. And then we have hospitable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's interesting because I don't tend to think of myself as hospitable, but I had a friend the other day.
Very much are.
Well, I was going to say, I had a friend the other day who I was like, man, you're just so gracious. You're so kind. And I was like, I'd like to be like that. And this was through text, and they said, you are. Every Wednesday you open up your home. Every Wednesday you bake something for us, and we come into your house and you feed us and you teach us and you spend time with us. And they're like, there hasn't been a time that I've reached out to you that you haven't gotten back to me. Like,
yeah.
So what they were trying to do is, I'm hospitable. It just doesn't look like what I think.
We have an idea of what that's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
You're thinking about someone who is making goodie bags for people that are sick, or
yeah. And I always think of Mindy Holt. I always think of Christy Dyer, and they're very hospitable people. Their hospitable looks different than mine.
Yes.
But just, yeah. So somebody who I am an introvert, and I do need, and I'm using that on purpose. I do need space sometimes where I can just clear my head and be on my own for a couple of hours. But I care about people a great deal.
The guys who don't fit this are the quote unquote pastors at a church who don't ever spend time with people.
Yes.
They sit in their office all week doing whatever.
Yeah.
And then they do their programmed events.
Yep.
And then they never spend time with people.
I saw a guy rip those guys the other day on Facebook, and I loved it so much. And he was just saying, like, look, if you're not spending time with people throughout the week, he goes, you're not a shepherd, you're a CEO.
No. And it's funny to me that we get in this mode in churches where, like, I want to make sure that the pastor's doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, someone asked my dad a long time ago, like, hey, can we put a time clock system in at church to make sure you guys are in the office? And he told him, his name was Bob. He was like, Bob, happy to, but don't call me after I clock out if your wife has to go to the hospital.
Right.
And he was like, well, wait a minute. And he's like, no, Bob, you can't have it two ways.
Right.
Like, either this is about the people or this is about the hours. Like, but it's funny that we brought that business model in where the expectation is that we got to make sure the pastors, you know, what's funny to me is people always go, well, you guys aren't really that busy.
Yeah. Okay.
Or like, you don't do a lot, but like what it is a value system, right? It's like, if I sat down with a licensed counselor and you did like marriage counseling with them and you got to pay them like $400 an hour, I don't know what it costs, right? You're acknowledging that there's some value in what they're doing, right? If I sit down with someone at lunch, people go, well, you're just eating lunch with somebody. Or this is a really incredible environment for us to do life together. Yeah. So listen, if you're listening and that's your perspective, stop, because you're not going to ever find a good shepherd if that's your mindset of what an elder should look like.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, so I went to the dermatologist this morning, and it was me and one other guy in the waiting area. And so I went up, I was there after him, and I went up and I said, Ryan Dalgliesh here for my appointment. And I went to sit down, and the guy goes, Ryan, hey. And I didn't recognize him.
I've been watching Simpler Bible the whole year.
Right. And so he was, so he was like, man, you don't know me. It's okay. But I emailed you on Simpler Bible, was asking you about different Bible translations and stuff. He goes, you've got me using the ESV right now. He goes, I've enjoyed it. And he goes, we actually had our appointment the same time last year. We met last year right here in the lobby.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Which is where I put him on to Simpler Bible.
That's funny.
So then we started talking about different things, and he started talking to me about the Textus Receptus and started some of this other stuff.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, so you're like actually a student? And he goes, yeah. I was like, man, that's amazing. And so he goes, we've kind of been wanting to come out to your church, but I'm an elder at my church. And he goes, but we'll sneak away for a Sunday at some point just to come say hi. But like, here's a guy that I met in the waiting room a year ago for my annual checkup. We talked clearly about the Bible. I clearly got him hooked on Simpler Bible.
Right.
And now here we are talking a year later. And some point in the last year, he emailed me and I emailed him back. And how do you quantify that?
You don't. That's why the perspective has to be shifted from a business mindset of a time spent and effort spent to what the role is. The role, if you have an elder overseer in your church that isn't leading people, then what are they doing?
Yeah. We got to go fast because we still have a lot. Able to teach. I think that's super important. Well, okay, that's stupid. My tendency is I want to elevate this one and a couple. I know, but there's a couple of them I kind of think more highly of. But able to teach, and that's very, very important. If you can't teach the Bible faithfully, and we're going to talk about this next week too. But if you can't teach the Bible faithfully, you have no business being an overseer.
I think that we might have to say that clearly. I think what he means here. Well, I don't know specifically. He just means.
Well, he probably doesn't mean Bible.
Because it's not there yet. But I think that there's a sense where it's like teaching in probably a more holistic viewpoint.
Yes,
it's probably founded on the scriptures.
Yes,
we would say that.
Yeah, 100%.
But I don't think it means that you have to be an expert in everything.
No,
it's more so like a teacher is a teacher. A teacher is.
Well, some people you can sit under, and they're just not good teachers.
Right.
So I had a not calculus. I had a chemistry teacher in high school that was the teacher that my aunts and uncles and my mom had like 25 years earlier.
Gosh.
And he was a terrible teacher. Like he just was not good at it. And so I wasn't a great student, so that didn't help. But all the other kids in my class who were great students taught themselves chemistry in study groups that they did together because he couldn't teach. And I didn't learn chemistry.
I think that's why in Ephesians 4, when he says pastor teachers, it's kind of this one phrase.
Yeah.
There's a sense of the shepherd that has the heart of a teacher as well.
Not a drunkard. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory.
Pretty easy.
We would say that he says of the deacons, not addicted to much wine. Like there's not the problem with the problem isn't the drinking. The problem is, remember self-control.
I think that's the point, is that this isn't a avoid alcohol.
Right. Not a drunkard. Not violent, but gentle. And I think that probably goes into a little bit of Titus. There's maybe a little bit of parallel there where he also says not a drunkard or violent. And both of those are kind of pushed together in both lists, not a drunkard or violent.
Interesting.
Which I think speaks to kind of a self-control issue, right? And so
I'm not that's one of those ones I'm not sure that people probably agree on what the definition of that is.
Yeah.
So I think that probably there would be people in Corinth that would be like, man, Paul's kind of violent.
Well, yeah. But I think also, interestingly enough, like we have to put this in the perspective of the church as a whole. Sorry, not the church as a whole, but like the church in Corinth or the church in Ephesus. So if an overseer who is violent and not one who's not addressing sin. I mean, like this isn't, hey, you have to address sin.
Yeah.
And Paul is pretty clear, like the language that Paul uses is pretty strong when he deals with sin. And he calls people out. Like in his letters, he straight calls people out. But there is something that's different about that than violence, right?
Yes. That's a good point, is that it has an intention behind it.
Right.
There's a difference, I think, between what he means by violence and what we would call intensity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's very intense. Not quarrelsome. That is one that, like, some people just want to, I cannot stand when people are like, I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. And I'm just like, why? Like, why? Like, have a conversation with me.
Sometimes
why do you just want to have a fight?
Sometimes I think people don't have the guts to just say I disagree.
Yeah.
So they're like trying to put it off on somebody else.
Yeah, but like some people just want to stir the pot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like but we agree, right? Yeah. So then why are we doing this? Why are we having this quarrel? Not a lover of money. That's important. And
we've seen that.
Yeah.
You could see that like example after example of that.
And this isn't, they can't be provided for well, because Paul's really clear.
No, there's
the shepherd should be provided for.
I think this is probably like the same heart of what Jesus says. You cannot serve both God and mammon. Like it's someone who loves money.
Yep.
That's their core.
Well, and what does Paul say later, right? That it's the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
not money.
Right. And so he must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? This one is so important. I know you said, and you're right, that they're all equally important.
I agree. They're all on the same list.
Yeah.
I think Paul actually he spends a little bit more effort.
Yeah, it's not just one thing. It's not one.
And here's
word.
why. I think that this is more of a tell.
Yes. And so back to your point earlier, to a young guy who's not married, who doesn't have kids yet, you have to weigh him by all the other standards. He might be qualified as an elder, but then he might get married and be a terrible husband and father. And you're
I'm probably, this is me saying it.
Yeah.
Open for debate. I'm probably not appointing someone who's not married.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's probably too many possibilities for it to go awry.
Yes.
But in this one, the number of men, I'll tell you, there was a pastor years ago. So a buddy of mine, I won't say his name, but a good friend of mine, he used to be on staff at this church, and he called me one day and he goes, dude, things are blowing up here. I was like, what's happening? And he goes, I just got to the church really early this morning and the pastor was sleeping on his couch. Come to find out, he's been sleeping on the couch in his office for the last 3 weeks. Like, he and his wife were separated and no one knew. And then his daughter got arrested. She was in high school and she was publicly drunk. And so the police, small town, the police took her home. And when they got there, the parents weren't there. And the brother had barricaded him inside his own room. And so they broke into the door, and the brother had been bleeding himself and drawing all sorts of obscene things on his walls in his own blood and feces. And the church, all this came out, and the church was like, well, we'll let you have 2 weeks off so you can take care of stuff.
What the heck?
And he was just like, and my buddy's like, I don't know what to do.
You leave.
And I said, you're the only sane person there. Like, you shepherd these other people for now,
man.
right? Like, because my friend is qualified. Like,
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like, you shepherd these people.
Mm-hmm.
And he did for a while. But the fact that the people were like, we'll give you 2 weeks off so you can straighten things
They're
up.
looking for someone to fill a role. They had,
this dude clearly is not managing his household. Like, his marriage is in trouble. He's living in his office at the church. Both of his kids are in trouble. He has no idea what's going on in his home, or if he does, he doesn't care.
Right.
And this line here by Paul, if he can't manage his own household, he can't manage the church of God.
Right.
We have to take that seriously.
Yeah. I think for me, it's at the forefront of a consideration. So I'm probably not going to the rest of the list.
You're starting there.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's such an obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's such an obvious one. And here's the thing. I've asked people, I've had crazy amounts of opportunities when I was traveling full time to come in and fill a pulpit for a few weeks because they were looking for a pastor, and hey, will you come and fill our pulpit for 3 weeks? Yeah, I'd be glad to. And I've had opportunities in those moments to sit down with the search committee, and I would point them to this list every time. And I would say, have you taught to the family? Have you taught to the wife?
Mm-hmm.
Have you taught to the kids?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see, have you spent time in their home?
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the things that Michelle and I try to do is we do try to have people in our home, because we feel like it's one thing for us to say life should look like this, and you can say it all you want. But if you have people in your home, you can't hide stuff. Like, if they're in your home consistently, you can't hide it.
Right.
And eventually what they'll do is go, man, this home's different.
Mm-hmm.
And they get this sense that, like, what are you guys doing here? Like, it's different than what I've seen before.
I can feel it.
Yeah.
When not everybody can. Right. I can feel it when I walk into somebody's house.
Well, you're discerning. You have that discernment. But early on, because we've been out here in Dove Creek now for 5 years, we've been meeting out there. Early on, we had a family come into our home, and the husband told me later, he was like, I didn't want to come into that home.
Because of what was?
He goes, because I had been in there a few years ago, and I left, and I told my wife, I will never step foot in that home again. And he was telling me this like the next day or a couple days later, and he goes, when I walked into your home, he goes, it was just different.
It felt different.
Yeah. And I was like, good.
Makes me, on a side note, makes me happy we did some remodel in there.
Yes.
Because it at least feels different too.
Yes,
like
it
in
does.
its look.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, he's commenting on how bad the leadership was. We didn't take over the church.
No.
The church died, and then we got the property. But
yeah.
there was still the correlation with the house and the church.
And what had been
buildings.
before.
Yeah.
Must not be a recent convert, or he'll become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Like this one just feels obvious.
Yeah.
There are so many people who are like, oh man, they're on fire. They're on fire for Jesus. And I know that it is not a popular approach. And I know that I've pissed people off, but I have said, I've tried to change now how I say it, to say it a little bit nicer. But I have said in the past when I used to do events and a youth pastor would come up to me at a big camp or whatever, big for West Texas for me, you know, but a youth pastor would come up to me and go, man, we had 15 kids receive the Lord this week. We're so excited. And I'd be like, I'm a cynic. And I'd be like, great, let's see where they are in 5 years. You know, like, let's see where they are next summer.
Right.
And I would just deflate. And I changed it to where I didn't deflate that as much.
You're trying to make it positive now.
And try to make it more positive. But the reality is you and I have done this for a long time. And we have seen a lot of people who will get really excited about Jesus. It is the middle two soils in Matthew 13 that they receive the word with great joy, but then the pressures of this life, persecution, or the love of money draws them away, and then they're done. And so you kind of have to give the new convert time to let the dust settle and see if they're actually a convert, first of all. And then if they are, what kind of convert they're going to be, because they might not be qualified. And just their exuberance today is not a tell for the kind of person that they'll be.
Right. I actually kind of like that he doesn't put a time frame on it.
I do too.
It just says recent convert, because I think there's some wisdom that has to be implemented in what that looks like.
Yeah. Moreover, he must be thought of well by outsiders. So I'm going to say that those are probably those outside the church, those outside of faith, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil.
It's funny because I think at the core of all these is character. So even that one is like someone with good character is going to be well respected by outsiders.
Yeah. Yeah. He treats them well. He's an honorable person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this list, like, here's the truth. The reason that people don't want to abide by this list is because the standard's too high. It is a way shorter list to say, oh, they pastored a big church and they have such and such a degree. It's two things.
Yeah.
You're looking at two things. And do we like his teaching style? There's the third thing.
Yeah, yeah.
This list is pretty exhaustive.
I think a lot of people will also add in there, like, can he grow the church?
Yeah.
I mean, whether they want to acknowledge that or not, that's what they all say.
Well, that was what I was implying by he came from a big church. Because you know what I mean? Same concept.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, he had a big church over there. He'll turn us into a big church. And
which is kind of a dumb goal.
It is. Yeah.
It's people are going to be like, probably like, isn't that y'all's goal? No, it's not our goal. It's never been our goal.
No.
I could care less.
Yeah.
I care about the people.
We do.
I want the people to come because we care about the people.
We want them to know Jesus and we want them to walk faithfully with Christ.
Yeah.
But this standard is so high and it's so good.
Yes, but I don't actually think it's that high. Here's why.
Okay.
I think this is probably...
By comparison, maybe it's high to the standard we've been using.
I mean, but that still implies that somebody has a standard.
Okay, go.
Right? So like all right, let me put it in disc golf. If you're the standard of what good disc golf looks like,
oh, I suck.
The standard's really, really high, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like I think I'm uncomfortable with like a measure.
Yeah.
This is the standard.
Yeah.
It's not too high. This is the problem is that people think about it in a standard.
So instead of thinking about it as high or low,
this is the standard.
This is the standard.
Yeah.
So anything else is not the standard.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Because then what we do is we run the danger of putting it on a spectrum.
Yeah.
And saying, well, look, I know they're not the highest standard, but
they get 50%. The people do that stupid crap. And it's like, no. This is what Paul says an overseer should look like.
And gives an almost identical list to Titus, and both of these are entrusted with appointing elders. So he felt pretty seriously about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know what you're saying.
Like I like what you're saying.
If we have a comparison of what has been, people feel like the standard's high, but the problem is they have a standard.
It's binary.
Yes.
Here is the standard. Everything else is not the standard.
Correct. They don't fit.
Yeah.
It's not a question of like, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
It's they either fit or they don't.
So the person who's looking at the metrics of how big did you grow your church? How fast did you grow your church? What was your education? None of that's on Paul's list.
Right.
You're using something that is not the standard.
And I'm not downplaying those things as catalysts and assets for someone to function in the role of leadership within the church. I also, side note, I also don't think that this is well, I don't know how to explain this. Let me say it like this. I think if, let's say you had someone who qualified, was appointed as an overseer, and let's say something happened, they made some kind of bad decision, like family-wise or finance, something like that, and then the church felt like they were disqualified. I don't think that means they're disqualified forever.
Forever. Yeah. I would agree with that. Yeah. Otherwise, we'd be saying that character can't change. Yeah. And we know that Christ is bigger than that.
I think there's too many examples of someone with character making stupid decisions, like David, for example.
Yeah.
And I think there's modern day examples of that. I think the opposite of that would be like Ravi Zacharias.
Yeah.
Who looked the part, Kevin Reynolds, who now pastors Church of the Vine, and people are like, you're going to call him? Yes, I'm going to call him out, and we'll forever call him. But like someone like that who has every single ministry he ever has been part of, he's sleeping with women. So like I'm not saying that there can't be like a move forward. I'm just saying like the difference between someone who's qualified that makes a mistake or does something, I'm going to say it differently. Sorry.
Yeah.
Someone that's qualified because I think it is that, right? But like someone who's qualified that does something stupid that dishonors Jesus, that makes them disqualified in the moment. I don't think it means they're disqualified forever. Yeah. That to me feels different than someone who's probably never been qualified, but been put in the position because they look the part.
Well, and there's a difference between an exception to the character and continually bad character.
Yes.
Because we started with this is character.
Right.
So if your character has always been amiss,
right,
then it's not an issue of you didn't glorify Jesus in this one thing.
Right.
And now there's been repentance and there's been,
I have a feeling if we were to sit down with Ravi's family, they would have told us some things.
Yeah.
That they had noticed that were obvious, that we would have been like, oh.
His team, when they published it all, they said in hindsight, they thought of things that at the time they didn't consider a big deal, right? Because they're like, oh no, we trust him. He's doing the right thing. And they said for anybody else, we would have been like, this is weird. This is suspicious. But they allowed themselves to trust him blindly because they venerated him to a point where he was above reproach in their mind. And he where normally they would have been like, hey dude, wait a minute. They weren't doing that to him anymore.
And he's a bit of a different situation because he wasn't shepherding a church, right? He wasn't as far as I know, he wasn't an overseer at a church.
I don't think so, yeah.
Like he was just on the road. So it's a little different, right? But it's an example of someone.
Yeah, but it still pisses me off.
Yeah, but I'm saying like in terms of it's different in terms of like if this is one of the benefits of a plurality of leadership, a plurality of overseers, elders, is that you're going to more quickly see those things in each other.
Yeah, for sure.
If Ravi was on staff, I'm going to say it different. I've got too many old words in my mind. If Ravi was an overseer elder at a church that had multiple overseer elders, someone would have seen it.
Yeah.
Someone would have noticed things.
Yeah. Yeah. And people, Well, and
so
we've walked together for 22 years, you and I, and we've gotten to know each other pretty well. And so I think that I would like to think that we would see those things in each other as well.
100%. Because I think we also, that many years of friendship and doing life and ministry together, we're used to the norm in terms of someone walking with Jesus and doing well. I think we know when things are off.
We've seen the hard times that we've gone through. We've seen our growth periods. We've seen when our hearts have been broken.
Yep.
We've seen all that together.
And even there's times, last Sunday, you were like, man, yesterday I was just in a bad mood all day. So like, there's an openness in being able to acknowledge you didn't feel like you had to like placate me and say like, no, I'm always good. Right. So that's the benefit is we can be transparent with each other. Yeah. We've had conversations before where I've told you like, man, I realized I treated Cammy really bad in this situation. So I'm not trying to cover that and be like, Ryan has to think of me in a certain way. No, I'm like growing in this, and you're part of that growth.
Yeah, and the fact that agreed.
We have a
open friendship.
We have an unwritten rule. For the 456 that for our elders and overseers that if you can't have an intense conversation with Micah and not have your feelings hurt all the time, you probably shouldn't be an elder overseer at the 456. I know that's not one of the written things, but that's more of a wisdom thing in terms of us. Yeah. Because really, if someone was going to have their feelings hurt all the time because I question like something, if someone just said like, if someone had said that was new to the eldership as 456 said, I think that people think the standard's too high, and I was like, no, it's the problem is the standard. Yeah. And they felt like I like crushed them with that statement. they probably aren't fit to function as an elder. At
and
the
also
456.
it shows their ego.
Oh, that's fair.
Because I invite you to poke holes in my thought because I want to think properly.
No, that's fair.
And so if every time you're trying to poke holes in something, I'm getting bent out of shape. Now, there have been plenty of times you've tried to poke holes and then I'll retort with something. You're like, oh, yeah, never mind.
People don't think I'm actually open to the retort, but I am. There just has to be a good reason behind it.
It has to be a good retort.
It can't just be like, I don't like you said that.
Yeah, right,
that just pisses me off even more. Because I think that what's underlying in this is character. And someone who has character.
So that's the simpler.
I think so. Because someone who has character is not easily shifted, is not easily shaken. They're not easily moved. They are.
Yeah.
They're the husband who will lead their family well no matter what's going on, whether it's plenty or little, whether it's persecution or not. That's that husband, right? So sure. I know that Paul doesn't say that. I'm adding that in, but I think that's the implication of manage your household well.
Yeah. They're consistent.
Yeah. I don't think, I also don't think that means that it doesn't mean your kids don't do stupid stuff.
Sure. But you manage that well.
Yes.
You're
it's
training
how you manage it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the simpler view is that this is someone of character.
Yeah. Wrap us up.
That's it. Where simpler view is that's someone of character.
You know somebody of character.
One more thought. I do think as we move forward, this has to be the people that we, however the appointment goes in somebody's local gathering, whether it's a committee that's not actually elders appointing, which I hate, it's not a good idea. But if you're on one of those committees, at the least, please make this the standard.
Right. Well,
sorry, my bad.
You can't say it that way.
I'm like, okay, I'm a little
please
like
recognize.
I'm a little off. Like
please recognize that there is no standard.
There's no
but
standard.
This one.
This is the thing. They have to fit these qualifications, or they're not. You shouldn't bring them in, because what it will bring is chaos and pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And you won't be led well. You won't be shepherded well.
Yeah.
Because I actually don't think there's an anomaly.
Yeah.
I think you either fit or you don't.
Yeah.
You're either qualified or you're not.
Yeah. Agreed. I love it.
Cool. Well, thanks, Stephen, for having us out, and
watch all the stuff.
Appreciate you unlocking the door for us and getting the heater on. It's cold today, so sorry, Ryan. I'm having to keep it cold in here because I'm like a little bit.
You're good,
woozy.
Man. I'm glad I changed out of my shorts though, because I was going to leave my shorts on.
That would have been really cold.
And I would have been hurting.
That would have been really cold. Yeah. Had to have a blanket. Yeah. I have an extra hoodie you can use as a blanket.
Yeah, I would have put my legs through the armholes.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody, thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys.
Keep Christ as core.
What could be simpler than that? See you later.